Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to remind everyone that our meetings are web streamed and televised, and for those in attendance, I would ask that you please ensure your phones are on silent mode. We will start today with our Board of Health meeting, and then we will begin the public hearing meeting at 3 p.m. With that, I'd like to call to order the Board of Health. Approval changes to the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented, unless there's any changes or additions? Approved as presented. Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Ravitz. All those in favor? And that's carried. Any declarations of pecuniary interest today? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to the approval of the minutes. We have the minutes of October 6th and 27th meeting before us. Are there any errors or omissions? Okay, seeing none, they will be declared adopted. Communications. First, we have a memo on the staff report HSS 20-21. That's in regards to the COVID update and sustainability plan, additional informations, program, and service reductions. And Marlene, are you going to present on that, or are we?
So through you, Madam Chair, I wasn't presenting, but if members of the board have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Good. It was just a follow-up to the part of the resolution from last week. Perfect.
Any questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, if I could have a motion to approve the correspondence. Councillor Micheli, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? And that's carried. Now moving on, I guess, Shanker, your medical update.
Madam Chair, members of the Board of Health, thank you so much for letting me speak today. So if I could share, the goals of the Public Health Service as it relates to COVID-19 are to limit transmission of COVID-19, which from a granular point of view translates into reducing the number of people who get sick and the number of people hospitalized and ultimately those who might die. It also has other goals. One is to maintain hospital and health service system capacity. We have this compelling goal to try to keep schools open and to protect vulnerable people, be that on age, disability, social status, ethnicity, race, cultural background. And also, it's key to try to maintain public health capacity, the ability to identify, test, self-isolate people who might be affected by COVID-19 and to continue with contact tracing and management. So today, there was an announcement by the provincial government at 1 o'clock, and there's a new framework to describe or to tier different health districts as it relates to COVID-19. So, and the words that they use are prevent, protect, restrict, control, and lockdown. And that is a continuum of restrictions related to COVID-19. So that's a new framework, and there are colors associated with that, including green, yellow, orange. And my memory doesn't serve me right on the last one, but I think red is the end one. The reason I share this is that this new framework will allow to give some additional granular data to make judgments, and that might include the number of cases in the last week, the likelihood that one person might infect another person, the level of community transmission, the number of hospital and ICU beds available in public health capacity. So I've only had a brief chance to look at those documents, but I'm happy to comment on them further or privately once we get a chance to read it in its entirety. In our health district, we have about 550 cases, and I always preface this data. There's lots of data. We sometimes make mistakes in how we present data, but no one data element captures the story. We have about 550 cases. In the last 30 days, we've had 53 cases, of which 13 have no epidemiological link, or the other term is the number of community spread cases. In the last 14 days, we've had 38 cases with 7 where there's no epidemiological link. The rolling average over the last 14 days is about 3. The number of people currently self-isolating is 240. without sharing any private items. We have schools, employers, recreational events, all with clusters of cases. There's an outbreak at Dunnville Hospital, and we've had other clusters associated with religious institutions and families. Province-wide, we have a range between 800 and 1,000 cases a day, with approximately 3,100 deaths. So the one other thing I'd like to share is that I was just on the phone with my colleague as the medical officer of health in the adjacent health district. There is an outbreak on a farm, and I think they'll be providing additional information, but and we'll wait for them to speak to it more boldly, but there are 160 people on this farm. 40 have tested, 160 migrant farm workers on the farm. 40 have tested positive. One is currently hospitalized. So that information, there should be more information on that outbreak. So in closing, I think that our strategy is the same, which is to try to effectuate public health measures to try to prevent transmission of the illness, encourage people to stay at home unless there's a compelling reason to leave, to wear a mask when it's appropriate, to encourage social distancing and avoid large gatherings. And the Public Health Service continues to advance that plan, and I'm happy to answer any questions members of the Board of Health might have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Shanker. Any questions from the board? Councillor Columbus, Board Member Columbus.
Is that, Doctor, where did you say that farm was located?
It's in the Southwestern Health District. I'm not an expert at the geography.
It's in Ontario, though, is it?
It's next door in Southwestern, which is west of us.
Yep.
It's in the adjacent county.
Yep. Thanks very much.
Any further questions from the board? No further questions for Shanker? Great. If I could have a motion to receive the update from Dr. Nasathari as information. Councillor Rabbit, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? That's carried. And moving on now to staff report, HSS 20-11, the annual service plan budget submission and funding update. Marlene, if you'd like to present your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask Ms. Pongratz, the author of the report, to present the report, and then we'll be happy to entertain questions.
So thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity today to provide the committee with report HSS 20-11 regarding the annual service plan budget submission and funding update. This report is for information purposes and to request a budget amendment. The Health Unit submitted its third annual service plan and budget submission to the Ministry of Health on March the 2nd, 2020. The purpose of the annual service plan is to communicate program plans and budgeted expenditures for a given year, describe the programs and services boards of health are planning to deliver in accordance with the Ontario Public Health Standards based on local needs. The annual service plan was completed with an assumption of a planned funding change to the municipal share to 30% for public health programs and services effective as of January the 1st, 2020. The cost-sharing change applied to all cost-shared and 100% ministry-funded programs, with the exception of the Ontario Seniors Dental Care Program and the Medical Officer of Health Compensation Initiative. The accountability agreement utilized for the submission was received on December the 9th, 2019, and included both provincial and municipal sources of funding. In September of 2020, we received our new accountability agreement for the 2020-2021 funding year. The maximum funding available under the agreement is up to $7,588,800, which includes $6,073,400 in base and $1,515,400 in one-time funding. Table 1 within the report illustrates the applicable one-time funding received for 2020-2021, and the base funding allotment is noted in Table 2. This year, the annual service plan did not provide us with the opportunity for base funding requests. Only one-time funding requests were allowed to be submitted this year. The health unit submitted 5 one-time funding requests totaling $427,900, and we successfully received $135,000, with $10,000 towards the PHI, or the Public Health Inspector Practicum student, and $125,000 towards cost recovery for retrofitting the Haldeman offices. Table 2 of the report illustrates the 2020 base funding allocation. The health unit received a total of $6,073,400. The base funding included reductions of $325,400 for the mandatory programs and $17,400 for the MOH, AMOH compensation. There was additional one-time funding for 2020, 2021, and 2022 due to COVID-19, and that is found in Table 3 within the report, which includes new ministry-mandated public health case and contact management software that we had to purchase, temporary pandemic pay for the nurses, the School Focus Nurses Initiative, and the Medical Officer of Health, Associate Medical Officer of Health compensation. The COVID-19 School Focus Nurses Initiative will fund 5 FTE nursing staff for the school health program until July 31st, 2021. Mitigation funding of $325,400 is available for use until December 31st, 2021. And the health unit anticipated being eligible for $130,300 of this funding allocation. And that was at the time that this report was submitted, and I anticipate that we'll be eligible actually for the full amount of that funding now. Other items to note in the report is that the new accountability agreement for 2020 has 11 mandatory and related programs reduced down to 3 now, which allows staff to operate with fewer financial restraints and move money to different buckets within the funding. Please also note that the grants for extraordinary costs related to COVID-19 has been submitted to the Ministry of Health for the 2020 budget year. And to conclude, I'd ask that this report be received as information and that the approved 2020 Haldeman Norfolk unit operating budget be amended to include $14,700 in base funding and $892,400 in one-time funding for a total of $907,100 as outlined in Table 4. So thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll open the floor to any questions.
Thanks, Stephanie. Questions from the board members? Can you comment on the 5 nurses that we were provided the funding for from the province and where we stand with that?
So we're currently in recruitment for the 5 nurses that we received funding for. We are looking at an allocation with registered nurses and registered practical nurses. Within the Schedule B of the funding agreement, it actually outlays the requirements for the funding and how it can be used. And so right now we are in the process of recruitment.
So the plan is to hire 5 nurses?
5, yes.
Okay,
And
so
we
I
did-
just hope this concerned residents group that's out there hopefully is hearing this, because I'm getting tired of hearing how the health department is only recruiting 4 nurses even though they've been paid for 5.
So, Madam Chair, if I can just expand on that. So we have been provided funding for 5 nurses, and we have every intention of hiring 5 nurses, and I've always had that intention. There is a funding maximum of $500,000 for those 5 nurses, and so we're currently looking at a complement of RNs and RPN, and we're working with ONA on that, as in the current collective agreement. It doesn't support, the language doesn't support RPNs. However, to stay within the costing envelope and to ensure that we provide the 5 FTEs and to increase our capacity for the school program, we are moving forward with a complement of RNs and RPNs to stay within the funding envelope. So yes, absolutely, we have full intention of hiring 5 nurses.
Thanks, Marlene. So hopefully the media and hopefully our listeners out there that seem to have hearing gaps sometimes have been paying attention. Could you comment a little bit, Stephanie, on the temporary pandemic pay initiative and how that's allocated?
Sure. So again, Within the actual Schedule B of the, and I believe this was an attachment that was included, it does outlay how the temporary pandemic pay is allocated. The allocation actually was from April the 24th to August 13, and it was for any nurses that were involved in direct patient care.
Okay, thank you. Member Rabbits.
Thank you, and through you. I also had some questions about Schedule B and some of the mandatory programs, as well as some of the funding arrangements. As a Board of Health, I wanted to know, we're putting this recommendation forward for additional one-time funding, but for those that are having monies owed to them in terms of pandemic compensation, if approved, I believe this would go to Council for ratification. How soon could staff members expect to be receiving monies as a result of this one-time funding increase? What is the impact to our staff of this report, and what are some of the timelines associated with it?
So through you, Madam Chair, we're speaking specifically to the pandemic pay. Yeah, so if I may, the pandemic pay has already been issued to the nurses, so those that were eligible, their finance and through Stephanie have worked through what the eligibility was. It was very specific to direct exposure to patients with COVID, so it was limited. We will not maximize the $64,000 within the report, but there was a time frame, I believe, from April till August. Those calculations have been completed, and they have been paid out to the respective nurses that were qualified for the funding envelope.
So through you, this report is to mitigate some of those costs that were already incurred by the municipality. Is that a correct understanding of the intention of the report?
So this particular report was related to the annual service plan, which is an annual funding accountability agreement, and we did submit one-time grants. Not all were accepted, some were. There was additional one-time grants because you have to appreciate this annual service plan was submitted in late February, early March. So there was additional one-time funding related specific to COVID. Additional costs incurred by COVID have been submitted under a different grant application with extraordinary grants, and finance is actively working with the ministry to secure some of those extraordinary costs. So that will be above and beyond, and that has been submitted earlier this year, and we're hopeful we'll receive funding for that, for the costs incurred and future costs up to and including December 31st of this year. And it's understood that extraordinary costs grants will be available into 2021 as well.
I had one more, and thank you, through you. So with reference to the memo that was provided earlier, because I did notice that there are programs within the schedule that are mandatory that will no longer be able to be fulfilled. And I was wondering if you might be able to help us correlate items that are in the memo that are actually contained within that schedule that moving on a move forward basis, there are some mandatory programs there that we do not have the capacity to continue to offer.
So through the chair, a couple of things. You are correct, and hence the letter to the minister and to our Chief Medical Officer of Health to get feedback on that. It is my understanding, and I will pass it over to Finance. He has had most of the conversations with the ministry. It's my understanding that those costs, I just lost my train of thought, so I'll turn it over to Michael just to answer some of that specifically, if I may.
Through the chair, so I can't speak exactly to which programs can or can't be offered, but for the funding as a whole, the ministry has allowed us to use the mandatory program funding for services that won't be available during the year. They've allowed us to use that for redeployed staff. So we do plan on allocating, and that'll be upcoming in the variance report. We do plan on utilizing the full 70% funding allocation for mandatory programs.
So, Member Abbas, sorry, could you repeat that again? Did they reply to this letter?
So I'll take it, Michael. Thank you, Michael, for my lapse of memory there. But no, they have not replied. We'll haven't sent it yet. We wanted to present it to the board today, so they have not replied. But they have advised finance that we will be able to allocate some of the funds from the mandatory programs that hadn't been utilized to COVID costs. So there is an opportunity for the shifting of that variance. So there's a variance currently because we haven't provided the programming because of redeployed staff to COVID. So they'll enable some of that variance to be applied to the COVID costs that have been incurred.
Member Roberts, if it's okay, I just want another question about the letter, because I'm glad you brought it up. I was going to bring it up later. But was Haldeman provided a copy of this letter?
So through you, Madam Chair, they were provided a copy yesterday as was circulated to the board.
To all of the council members in Haldeman as well?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not sure if it went to clerks or to all of the members directly, so I'll have to confirm. It was sent to Haldeman staff.
I think there's a little bit of surprise there. So I'm just curious, though, like I was a little bit taken aback by this letter myself. I didn't know whether to discuss it later or, did we give direction that I was just asking Owen to pull up the agenda from last Board of Health meeting. Did we
Yes.
give direction to send this letter?
So through you, Madam Chair, if you read the resolution from Report HS 2021, I believe, the last resolution was to send a letter of the services based on the scenario that was voted on by the Board of Health.
My understanding from the scenarios was, I mean, some of these, like I find this, I thought it was more that here are the services that we may not be able to provide in full, but we are still going to attempt to provide services. And with hiring 17 additional people, you know, depending upon what happens, you know, in the coming months with COVID, we may not be able to, you know, do all of these mandatory services. But to say that as of today, we just hired 17 people, we can't do any of these services, I find a bit strange. And so I find this letter, I don't know, I just, to put it bluntly, like, are we sending this letter to see that if they reply back and say, no, you can't do this, so that it becomes an I told you so? Like, I just don't understand the purpose of this.
So through you, Madam Chair, we have accountability agreements, and the ministry would want to know what we're not able to provide. If you recall through the scenarios, there were programs in the red. If you recall that chart, I believe it was Appendix 1 in the previous report, that articulated those that we would not move forward with depending on what the board approved. So that's what's articulated in this letter. It's understood by staff that if things change in the COVID world and we can shift into those programs, definitely we will do that. There will be fluctuation in the I'll call it the yellow in appendix in the Appendix 1 from last week that we are partially implementing, and we will continue to implement, and will fluctuate based on the surge capacity or the capacity of the current staff. Recognizing that although 17 FTs were approved last week, we're still in the initial phases of the recruitment, so that staff isn't available to us at this point in time. So yes, that appendix did articulate that the red would be services that unfortunately the health unit does not have the capacity to move forward with at this point in time.
That's fair enough. The staff isn't available yet that we're planning on hiring. However, 3 weeks ago, that staff wasn't available either because we didn't have those numbers and we didn't send a letter to the ministry at that time.
Through you, Madam Chair, we were seeking direction on October the 6th for that, and it was with the reopening of the province. These services haven't been provided since the onset of COVID, unfortunately.
There's been no food safety inspections for low-risk food premises and special event vendors? I think there have been.
Through you, Madam Chair, I will ask Stephanie to comment, but my understanding is that low-risk food inspections have not been completed to date.
That's correct.
There haven't been any?
Excuse me, through the chair to the chair. We've been focusing on complaint-based inspections and also high-risk food inspections. Marlene's correct that low-risk food inspections have not been completed to date. We've been focusing on other inspections with the limited capacity that we've had.
So my understanding in an email, and I think there was an event from the BIA that happened, and one of the challenges that they ran into was that, they provided notification on like a Friday that or a Wednesday, something to that effect, that they needed an inspection for that coming weekend. What they were told was not that they weren't doing any inspections, was that they needed a longer notice period, which is understandable. So I believe I still have that email. There was no indication that there was no inspections that were being completed. It was just that there was a longer notification period that was required in order to be able to do so.
So again, I'm not sure if we're actually using the same term for low-risk inspections. So a low-risk inspection would be something like perhaps a variety store, something with prepackaged food. If you're thinking of a mobile vendor or something like that, that falls into a potentially a different category.
Isn't that special event vendors?
Special events, we have been doing, and again, I'm going to actually look to Shanker on this as well, because he's been involved in multiple conversations with special events, but we have been limiting any special events that we've been doing just simply because we don't have the capacity.
That's fair enough. I get that, but that's the word. You guys have been doing limited. It's not that there hasn't been any. So that's why I find it funny, this letter to the ministry right now. I was a little taken aback when I read it, that it's not that it's completely cut off. It's that it had been done on a limited basis. So if there's an obligation to report, which is fair enough, why wouldn't that have been done previous to now if the suggestion is that we haven't been doing them?
My apologies. Through you, Madam Chair, we wanted to seek direction from the Board of Health, and I think just to articulate a little bit further what Stephanie has already stated, there's different levels of inspection, so it's not that inspections won't and haven't been done. They've been done on a complaint basis, and those that are high risks have been and will continue to be done. These are your low risk inspections, and that's what that is articulating, because there is a differential.
Member Rabbit, sorry to jump in there on you. Carry on. My apologies.
That's okay, thank you. And through you, I think I'll just state that I wasn't surprised by the letter or its contents. In fact, it was something that I was anticipating we would receive. We have compliance reporting, and this is part and parcel of communicating the results of the decision for 17.2 FTEs as opposed to the original ask. So it is something that I was anticipating would be coming forward. I was expecting it either at a council meeting or a Board of Health. But I was on a bit of a different gear or a different tangent where we're receiving one-time funding, and I was just worried about the complexities of no longer offering those services that we were granted the funding for. Like, is there a concern there that we may not be eligible for those monies in the future, or is there a problem with receiving a one-time grant for a service that's been discontinued or is being delivered in a limited fashion?
So through you, Madam Chair, to Board Member Rabbits, if I take it to Schedule A, all the one-time funding are being currently implemented and utilized. So from that perspective, I think more appropriately, if I may, it would be regarding the mandatory and the base funding. And it's our understanding that if we have redeployed staff to some of the other COVID work, that the funding would continue. We're optimistic that although we're not able to provide simply because we don't have the capacity, and we've sought Board of Health direction, so there was an awareness and guidance from the Board of Health, those funds should continue to flow. But I will see if Michael wants to provide any further financial commentary related to that.
Michael, did you want to provide anything else? Sorry. Okay, so just because we're on the same page, Councillor Rabbits, that's my concern right now also with this. So what specifically has been communicated then from the province?
Through the chair. So the province has sent communication to all boards of health, or to all health units, that any funding that is not going to be used by mandatory programs can be used for staff who have been redeployed to COVID activities.
Perfect. And so what is the balance then? I guess I could probably pull that up in the old report. Like, what's the balance then of the other mandatory programs that are being offered? What's that differential? I can pull it up in the report afterwards. If not, I just can't recall off the top of my head.
Through the chair, so you're referring to what we should have in excess of not offering those programs?
From the other mandatory programs. So still the latitude that we have to redeploy additional staff if we became into, a surge capacity for COVID in the months ahead. So what additional latitude do we have in the other mandatory programs?
Forgive me if I am not answering correctly, but this will be provided in the variance report, but it'll explain that we are anticipating to use approximately just over $2 million for COVID relief. That'll be moved from our mandatory programs funding allocation.
Thanks. And then the only other question I have as well, in terms of the pandemic top-up pay, none of that is applied. That's just into the health. Is any of that applied to Norview?
So through you, Madam Chair, Norview received a separate funding envelope for that, and that's been processed as well. So that's separate from the health unit. So that has been allocated to staff as well accordingly through finance and
Okay,
payroll.
perfect. That's great. Thank you. Further questions from the board? All right, thanks Stephanie very much. And Michael, if I could have a motion then to approve staff recommendation, that staff report HSS 20-11 annual service plan budget submission and funding agreement 2020 be received as information, and that the approved 2020 Haldeman Norfolk Health Unit operating budget be amended to include $14,700 in base funding and $892,400 in one-time funding, and further that the Board of Health endorse the delivery of one-time programs as outlined in the report. A mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Michelli, seconded by Councillor Columbus. All those in favor? And that's carried. I think it might be the fastest Board of Health meeting ever. And finally, a confirming bylaw, that bylaw 2020-11, BH being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings. Councillor Columbus, go ahead.
Could I ask a health-related question with respect to Norview to Ms.
Sure,
Miranda?
yeah, of course.
Yes, I just heard an announcement by the Ford government, I believe. They want to increase to long-term care, 40% increase in hourly timing to long-term care homes. And I think it just came out yesterday or the day before. It's something like 4 hours a day per resident in long-term care. How would that impact our employment if and when we actually pursue that increase?
So through you, Madam Chair, I haven't seen that directive, so my apologies, and I'm not clear what the question is of 4 hours per resident. Does that mean additional care to each resident? Is that what the directive
Yes,
is?
it sounded to me like
I just haven't seen it.
right now it's 2.7 or something, and they want to increase that to 4 hours a day for long-term care residents.
So through you, Madam Chair, I haven't seen it as I've stated, but I will definitely look into that, and I'll provide a report to Council. That'll come under CIC. We do have another report coming forward with funding that we've received from Norview, and if that's a new directive, we'll bring that forward for your consideration as well.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, Councillor Taylor, go ahead.
Thank you, Board Chair, and through you. I've had several people reach out to me wondering where they can get their flu shots. Everyone either seems to be out or they never didn't get enough, or schedules keep getting bumped. So if there's any updates on flu shot clinics and anything like that, that would be wonderful.
So through the chair to the board member, so I did speak with our program manager, who is responsible for the vaccine program before Board of Health, just to get an update. So it sounds like the high dose vaccine, we received that a few weeks ago from our supplier, And all of those shipments have gone out to long-term care homes, retirement homes, and our healthcare providers who've requested it within the community. We're expecting more within stock, and we're also receiving shipments as they come in through our Ontario government pharmacy for I would call it the regular flu shot, not the high dose, which is advised for anybody over 65 years of age. Folks can go and they can have their flu shot done at various pharmacies within the community, and they can be provided there.
Thank you.
Anything further? Okay, again, if I could have a mover and a seconder for the confirming bylaw. Moved by Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Rabbits. All those in favor? That's carried. And with that, we'll adjourn the Board of Health at 3:37, or 2:37 rather, and we'll be back for the Public Hearings Committee at 3 p.m. Lands Incorporated have put forth the application affecting the lands described as 56, 62, and 64 Pond Street and 48 Sydenham Street in Simcoe, Ontario. And Fabian, I guess you're going to be presenting this report?
Through the chair. That's correct.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Madam Council, and through the chair. So I'd like to start off by saying good afternoon. Essentially, the subject lands are located in downtown Simcoe along Pond Street and Sydenham Street. Currently, the property consists of retail uses as well as a large parking lot, an auto glass business, and a vacant building. To the north of the subject lands here is a parking lot, and to the south down here is the beer store as well as another shop, Plumbing World. To the east are commercial uses. To the west are commercial uses, and to the east are commercial uses, and beyond that is the Lynn River. So the proposed development consists of an 8-story, 67-unit residential building where 4 of the units are proposed on the ground floor with frontage onto Sydenham Street. The total floor area of the building is 8,300 square meters. So for the site, I'm just going to fast forward here because this one provides a very good explanation. So for the site, there are 2 proposed parking areas. There's a proposed parking area in this location where my mouse is, and then there's a proposed parking lot that will service the condominium. So this parking area would service the condominium, and this parking area would service the Brick, the existing commercial store. These 2 buildings here are proposed to be demolished and would be repaved essentially for the parking lot in order to service the condominium unit. So in total, there are 116 spaces being proposed. So for the condominium parking space, so in this area, there are a total of 63 parking spaces, with 8 of them being barrier-free spaces. And then in this area, there are a total of 53 spaces, which also includes 2 barrier-free parking spaces. So currently, the subject lands are designated downtown and hazard lands. So this portion of the property in green is designated hazard land, and the portion in, I guess that's pink, would be downtown designation. In terms of the zoning, the property is zoned Central Business District in the Norfolk County Official Plan. Yeah, so this portion of the property here is is zoned Central Business District. There's 2 components to this application. The first is an official plan amendment, and the second is a zoning bylaw amendment. The purpose of the official plan amendment is to add a site-specific policy to the official plan in section 7.8.3 to permit residential units on the ground floor with frontage onto Sydenham. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment is to change the eastern portion, so this portion right here, from CBD, so Central Business District, to hazard lands. And this would bring the subject lands into conformity with, a notification came up to restart the computer that I'm just going to ignore that. Yeah, so sorry, where was I? So yeah, the zoning amendment is to change the zoning for this portion from Central Business District to hazard lands for conformity to the official plan, as well as replace the existing special provisions in 14.709 and 14.930 to update to reflect the new proposal specific to this development, and to add a special provision in lieu of section 6.1.2 to permit a building height of 8 stories, to permit 4 residential units on the ground floor and fronting the street level, and to permit no step back of the upper floors. Also for the retained brick property, so for this portion here, to add a special provision to permit a parking lot in the front yard So through the circulation to agencies, there was one outstanding comment that was received from the finance department. Their comments are as follows. If approved, there is a potential tax and water and wastewater financial implication on Norfolk County residents in the amount of approximately $617,000. This amount could be spread over 6 years with interest charged. The reason for the financial cost is the property is within the current CBA and the county's current DC bylaw exempts DCs within the central business district. However, the funds need to be provided from the levy and rate budgets. No other outstanding comments were received from agencies, and there were no comments received from the public in regards to the subject application. Key items required from a staff perspective for if approved for the site plan application that would follow would be further evaluation of the reduction of the step back. Site plan issues would be landscape design and overall buildings design will be discussed, as well as further documentation required for staff consideration through the site plan process. Staff will answer any comments that are received in the following recommendation report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, as well as the agent, Mary Elder, is also available on Teams and can assist in answering any questions. And this is the proposed rendering that was provided for the subject application. Thank you.
Thanks, Fabian. Any questions? I guess Councillor Taylor, start it off.
Thank you, and through you, would you read the finance comments again for me, please? A lot of information came in there, and I'd like to just hear that one more time before I ask any more questions.
Yep, through the chair, there is a potential tax and water and wastewater financial implication on Norfolk County residents in the amount of approximately $617,000. This amount could be spread over 6 years with interest charged. The reason for the financial cost is the property is within the current CBA and the county's current DC bylaw exempts development charges within the CBD. However, the funds need to be provided from the levy and rate budgets.
Okay, thank you. So I do have a question here. I had one concerned resident reach out regarding fire suppression. I believe that they would have to have internal systems because our ladders can't make it that high with the fire trucks, but I assume there's going to be an internal fire system in a building like this, correct?
So that, sorry, through you, Madam Chair, that would be addressed through the site plan process.
Okay. More questions, but they'll be from Mary.
Go ahead, Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And my question is with respect to, I forgot what I was going to say, sorry. Seniors moment.
Was it about the DCs?
No, it wasn't about the DCs, but it'll come back, Madam Mayor.
Seniors moment, that's okay, I'm just kidding. Councillor Michele.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a quick question for Fabian, and it's just about some terminology. In a couple of spots, and I'm first referring to page 4 of our agenda package, the fifth bullet point down refers to adding a special provision in lieu of section 6.1.5 to permit no step back. I'm sorry, is that meant to say step back, or is the term that we usually use for this setback? No setbacks. Just
Sorry,
trying to get, because I don't know if there are no steps involved with this part of that project, correct? That's not a reference to step back? Is it setback?
So through you, Madam Chair, there's two definitions, setback and step back. They're both definitions in our zoning bylaw. They're two different elements. So a setback is from the property line in which the distance between the property line and how far back the building is set is a setback. A step back is for the upper floors where essentially bottom portion, typically it's where the bottom portion of the building is closer to the lot line and the upper portion of the building is stepped back a little bit further inside, so it's technically further to the lot line.
Thank you for that clarification, Fabian. Thank you.
Councillor Columbus.
Yes, Madam Mayor, thanks for your patience. It came back. Were property owners within 400-foot designation all notified of this development?
Through you, Madam Chair, the property owners within the immediate neighborhood were circulated.
And we've had very little correspondence back, so that's good news, I guess. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, and through you. I was thinking about just emailing finance staff, but I wonder if you'll be able to answer this, Fabian. Of the $617,000 that would be foregone there, a typical property like this, what would a payback generally look like in the new generated property taxes?
Through the chair, it's Tricia here. We don't have those, so these comments just came through to us. We don't have the specific numbers. I'm not sure if there's anybody from finance who's available to answer, but the calculation that was provided would have been, so that would have been what the calculation would be for the payouts for development charges. So because of where this property is located, they're not subject to DCs, so we wouldn't be collecting those funds. And I believe finance indicated that those could be applied over a number of years for that. But that is essentially the incentive for inciting people to develop in the downtown. Is waiving the development charges for this.
Yeah, through the chair, just to supplement that it is a function of our incentive program, and that's how they work. And so the idea is to encourage and get residential development in the downtown. And Norfolk chose to, for a period of time, waive development charges downtown. However, that has to be funded somewhere through our budget still. And so I think finance was just pointing it out, how much is the case of what it means for this particular building. And I believe we would have a program set up for how we accommodate that, but it does have to be accounted for somewhere.
So if I can jump in, Brandon, I mean, we're well aware, it was this council actually when the DCs came forward that chose to pursue that incentive option. However, what was never explained at the time, and I also don't believe if finance is there with you, they can perhaps provide some comment, but to the best of my understanding is that they had not been properly accounted for in the past. And so it's not that we're not just not collecting the $617,000. We actually have to put $617,000 on the levy, which was never properly done in the past. And had that been explained differently at the time of the development charge presentation, I might have maybe thought differently about some things, but this information has now come to light on how to, yet again, clean up some more procedures that perhaps weren't done correctly before. So I'll let Kathy speak to that.
Through the chair to committee, you are definitely correct. It was a practice that Norfolk County was not doing when it came to development charges. So we do have a number of development charges that we have chosen through the bylaw to exempt. One of them being property within the central business area. Another example would be industrial lands. So every time we develop a property, and we exempt the properties, we still have to calculate the development charges and move those funds into the development charges accounts. And it's based on the legislation. And we didn't discover this until the last development charge study. So for those many years we weren't doing this. So we do have a budget included in the operating budget. Council did approve, I think it's 50,000. It's between 35 and 50,000 in the levy budget, and 75,000 in the rate budget. So we have started to account for these items. I do believe there'll be enough funding at this time to fund this project. because now that the CBCs, the central business charges, have come into play, and the changes in the Development Charges Act, we can, for example, this property, fund the development charge study over 6 years. So the total would be about $105,000 a year, and that would be shared between the rate and the operating budget. The problem with these charges is we just don't know what's going to be developed in the future. So it is a budget that we need to maybe build on a little more, but I feel there is sufficient funds for this property at this time. But you are correct. It is a new process for us, and last year was our first time providing a budget line. It was one of those budget deficiencies.
So just to explain for people that might be watching, Kathy, so in the past, like when people always say, well, when we look at our current water situation as an example now, that, you know, we should have been accruing development charges into a bank account, you know, to be able to, you know, pay for this future growth of a system, but there's no bank account with any money in it. So, you know, in the past, by not accounting for this on a levy, we still have to pay for that growth at some point in the future, but the dollars aren't there because it was never accounted for.
In essence, through the chair, that is correct. The problem with development charges is that we could build for water and wastewater. A lot of times the development charges reserve is not adequate because we are building, for example, a water plant for the future that will cover more than 10 years. So we don't collect all those contributions from development until maybe 20 years down the road. And that's why we do a development charge study every 5 years, so that is re-looked at, and eventually we do collect the funds. This one is, the exemption one is slightly different than the first example that you gave. It's just, like I said, we haven't been doing it. I understand there are a few municipalities that haven't did this also in the past, and they are starting to implement funding the charges, but it is growth that's going on that we still need to apply. You're right. We need to fund that reserve fund, the development charges. The growth money has to come from somewhere, so it's coming from the tax and the rate levy as opposed from the developer.
Sorry, I might have maybe explained that. I see the correction you're making there, but at the end of the day, if you didn't put this on a levy, you are still going to have to, the reason you collect development charges is to be able to support that, to build new infrastructure and to support that growth, whether it's brought in 1 year or over 10 years. However, in this case, by not accounting previously for those development charges that were waived and putting that on the levy, as a result, there isn't anything there that can be contributed to that fund in the future.
That's correct.
Any further questions from Councillor Rabbits? Go ahead.
Thank you, through you. My question for staff is, I do see that we have 2 subsequent reports that did go through the Committee of Adjustment, and this one had not. I assume that's because it wasn't a major rezoning. It was just that parcel, that was transferred to hazard land. And so did that not warrant review at that committee level? I'm just wondering why we got a summary of agency comments, but we didn't have it circulated through Committee of Adjustment. Maybe Brandon, if that seems to be your wheelhouse.
There was no Committee of Adjustment application made for this application. Sorry, I'm just trying to collect my thoughts here. So there's actually, the subject lands consist of 3 parcels. 2 of the parcels facing Pond Street will be merged, and a boundary adjustment from the 3rd will add the additional property to the merged lot. So if the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment is approved, then the applicant will apply for a consent application in order to merge the property. So at this time, there has not been a Committee of Adjustment application, and that's why the Committee of Adjustment was not circulated this application.
Understood. Follow-up question. Since a portion is proposed to be taken out of the central business district and rezoned to hazard land, is that portion, that parking lot, is it now no longer exempt from development charges, or is that putting the cart kind of before the horse? because they're asking to remove a portion of Central Business District. And if that's the portion that's exempt, so what about the remaining parcel, which will now be hazard land or a portion of it?
So through the chair, typically the exemption from development charges would be stipulated in the development charges bylaw. And the development charges bylaw would usually have a map, or it would have an explanation or a clause about what are the boundaries of the central business district. I don't believe that the rezoning of the portion of it would necessarily take it out. Either way, there's no development proposed on that land other than parking lot.
Further questions? Councillor Michelli.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this may be for the agent. One of the items in the report indicates that it's not known if these will be rental or ownership units. And I'm just wondering if someone, and again, this may be for the agent, could comment on, I'm a bit surprised that with a project of this size and scope, that some plan or some direction has not been considered as to whether this is going to be rental properties or are people going to be able to own them outright.
I think we should probably be thankful that they're doing something and that it's their business choice as to whether they're going to be rental or owned. That's their business model and their investment. But why don't we wait and let Mary Elder speak to it, and then you can ask your question to Mary if she has a vision for it at this point.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thought I was asking her that question.
Okay, so we'll do the presentations first, and then we'll carry on with further questions. Mary, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Welcome. So just as a reminder, you have a 5-minute time limit, and if you'd like, if you can begin.
Okay. So this is our vision, as you've already heard, of an 8-story apartment building with 67 units in it, 60 to be 2-bedroom units and 7 to be single units. I was checking today and I thought there were 73 parking spaces, but as I'll point out later, there has been a little change in the boundaries, so we'll settle on the parking spaces, I'm sure, before we get to site plan, that's for sure. The residential units are proposed to be on the main floor, which is something we're going to be speaking to. As stated in the draft plan of the Simco downtown secondary plan, increasing residential uses would improve the functions of the downtown. So this is why it's believed this is a good fit for the subject lands, which are currently underutilized. Now this is quite a complicated, terrible amount of detail picture, but it does show the south part where the white space is on the lower left. That's where the existing commercial building is that's currently occupied by the brick. And then in the lower right, we have the plumbing world and the dance studio. And then the upper middle where there's a white spot, that is the proposed location for the apartment building. So just to clarify or make a little simpler, the change that we're proposing currently with the brick or the commercial part where the yellow arrow is pointing, that's the narrower frontage. And so the parking lot has been in the rear. So that's been okay. But when we make the new line, the new red line that will separate the apartment building from the commercial part, where you see the blue arrow, that is now going to become the narrower street frontage. So this is why we need the exception. Pretty simple, just recognizing what's there, that we need a parking lot in the front yard. Now to speak to the second portion of it, it gets a little more complicated. And I'm sure we're back to the detailed mapping again, but the red line on here, if you can make it out, is the new proposed line. There were discussions with the building division as far as fire separation, and that's created a change in where the property line will eventually be. So there is now a bank of parking on the west side of the proposed apartment building that was previously with the brick. Now, this slide shows the subject lands, particularly the proposed building, and the two buildings that will be removed are on the east or the right side of the building. And this one also shows the hazard lands in the official plan, so that you can see where that line would come across the parking lot. Now, we located that building after much discussion with the Conservation Authority so that it is outside of the hazard land. And we are proposing, I should go back one slide here, I've gone ahead too soon. We are proposing that it be 8 stories high rather than 6 to take advantage of the views of the valley and the trees and so on along the Lynn River. There's no residential areas here that will be impacted by the building. We're looking at having residential units on the ground floor because this is more in the periphery. If you think about the Norfolk Street, Robinson Street, and how the commercial buildings are one right beside the other, they're certainly more spread out in this area and not as compact as you have in the main commercial area. We're also looking at no setback in the upper floors, and that step back in the upper floors is usually used where you have many towers in a more concentrated area because it creates a wind tunnel. And so by setting back some of the upper floors with a step back, it does decrease that, but we don't have that in this situation. So that's why we're proposing that that's not necessary. So to go to the next slide, I wanted to focus a little bit on planning staff's addition to our application. This slide shows in purple the official plan, Central Business District, and the beige part is the part that is hazard land in the official plan. And with the next slide, I just wanted to show to you that I'm having trouble finding that. There it is. Okay, so what we have is the subject lands shown here with lands to the east that are still the central business zone. There's a automobile insurance and there's a lighting, I believe, to the east of it. To the north, of course, we have Riverside 83. To the west, we have commercial buildings. And to the south, as I've mentioned before, we have the plumbing world and the dance studio. So if they were to take out this piece that's the parking lot in the front of this, I know it's a consistency matter, but there is a section in the official plan, in section 7.3.2, that says there are areas of extensive development located in hazard lands, and in these areas a reasonable compromise shall be made between the extent of hazard land and the continued use and future development of the area. The situation is particularly applicable in urban areas, hamlets, and resort areas. So my client is quite concerned that changing this portion of his property to match with the official plan isn't necessary, and in fact it could have some financial implications on his project and would prefer that it not be changed. Finally, I wish to speak to, in summary then, that this is an underdeveloped site, and it's not in a main commercial area. It's on the periphery of the downtown. It's adding residents to the downtown. The demand is high for rental apartments, and yes, the owner has gotten back to me that, in fact, this would be rental of these apartments. The auto shop is relocating, it's not being lost, and the increase of 6 to 8 stories adds more people, takes advantage of the view. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary, and thanks for answering Councillor Michelle's questions. I'll turn it over to Council now. Any questions from Councillor Rabbits? Go ahead.
Thank you, through you. Hello, Mary. Thank you for your presentation and for the planning rationale report. I did want you to elaborate on the shading, specifically with reference to Riverside 83. I know you had some information in your report, and I wanted you to have an opportunity to speak to it directly.
Yes, there was a shadow study done for the site plan, and I did prepare a second slide show that shows basically, as best I can figure, probably starting in about August and then through the fall, through the winter months, there will be shading on Riverside 83's outdoor patio. So they propose to have a patio on the outside. And here's my slides coming up now. So this is in April. You see that, and I did just put the 3 slides for just two in the afternoon so you could see. So in April, there probably isn't going to be any impact.
Just 1 second, Mary. It's not advancing for us.
Oh, okay. Do you see that now?
No, we're still locked on the initial slide.
Okay. Maybe I
There we
need to
go.
take.
Okay, I think
Yeah.
we're good now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so this is April. You can see that the shadow is just on the street. It's not going across. And then in June, it's still staying, as the sun gets higher, it's still staying on this side. But then by September, we're seeing that the patio is getting shadows. And there is another one in December I didn't put in here that shows it does get worse through the winter months. I did speak with representatives from the church out serving Riverside 83, and they do intend to use that view, and it is going to impact their use of their patio. Is there anything else, Councillor?
I mean, further to that, Mary, I just have some concern that not only the outside patio would be shaded. It is fortunate that it is later into the season. It's in the fall, so they're still going to get some prime time use throughout the summer. But that patio is also connecting to an atrium inside the building envelope. And so, there is a concern there. Whatever we can do in this application to mitigate that would be an ideal circumstance. I realize we can't always work with ideals. Compromises need to be struck. But if there's any way to limit that shading, especially during those prime time, those summer months where they're going to be well used, and folks are going to be starting to move indoors, probably starting in September as the weather starts to cool. There is an atrium inside that building envelope that we're hoping to get some sun in. So if there's any way to incorporate that concern into the building design, I'm not an engineer, but if we can in any way limit that shading, perhaps having, am I using the word step back, have maybe the top of that building just reeled back a little bit. Maybe the HVAC could be put on that side. I don't know what, but if we can in any way limit that shade onto that patio and onto that atrium, it would be well received by members of our community and by the Riverside 83 group.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts, for your comments. Councillor Columbus?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So am I understanding this correct, that the brick store is going to stay on this property? Okay. And going back to when does the owner of the property expect to commence development and removal of the existing buildings that have to come down? Like, when will this project proceed?
Through the chair, there's certainly been an interest in having it going now, but things have been delayed. So as soon as possible, that's for sure.
Okay, that's good news. And 15 to 20 years ago, there was a huge issue on Culver Street when they were rebuilding that road where they hit a number of springs, and there's like an underground spring system there. Is there any concern with this development? Is there a basement to it that the developer could run into some issues with the high water table? They actually had to drop the Lynn River to help build Culver Street.
That's news to me. I do know, though, that there have been boreholes taken on the site to check the suitability for this building. I'm not privy to the outcomes of all of that, but I know they've been looking at it to make sure it will be solid.
And I know there's still employees in Public Works at the Delhi office who are familiar with that construction, and maybe you can talk to them to get some insight on the issues that they encountered on the Culver Street reconstruction.
Thank you, Councillor Columbus. Councillor Taylor, go ahead.
Thank you. Several of the questions I had have been answered, but would you explore, your client doesn't want any zoning other than CBD? They don't want that rezoned hazard? Is that what you were saying?
Through the chair, that's correct. They're concerned that there can be financial implications for the building, for selling the building, for other matters that would relate to it. So.
Okay, I'm going to explore that with staff a little bit further later. So,
Mary, while we're on that subject, I kind of had a question too on the one slide from staff. Maybe I'm confused here. Can you just explain that again a little bit more exactly what you're asking? Like, why the change with the one from Central Business District to how is that coming to be? What's the driving force behind that?
That is not part of our application, Madam Chair. That has been added by staff.
Okay, I'll come back to Brandon then. Any further questions from council members? Do you have anything to add with your perspective on that, as to, especially given your experience on staff as a planner?
Well, I understand the history of it because the district plan for the town of Simco, I'm dating myself now, had a two-zone hazard land, so floodway and flood fringe. But when the 1999 town of Simco official plan was done, they dropped that and just went to hazard land. But what they did was they added that policy that I read tonight that said that in areas of existing development that compromise would be made. So that's where you can have a zoning bylaw where the CBD zone can be in fact not in sync with the official plan.
Okay, thank you for that. So my only comments would be just a couple things. So, you know, the developer's going from 6 to 8 stories to take advantage of the views. I'm assuming he's also going to take advantage of the additional revenue. The additional 2 stories, I want to probe a little bit more with staff in terms of the fire capabilities and so on from our fire department. But my only thoughts when I look, I think it's it's exciting for Simco. It's what we need. We need housing downtown. But as we look, and trying to bring in young people to the downtown and so on, I just, it's kind of boring, the brown. Like, has there been some thoughts into the aesthetics of the building that it doesn't look like it's something out of, the early 80s?
Through the chair, I can take that to my client. I think that some of them are listening tonight and see what they have to say as far as the aesthetics. As far as fire, I would like to point out that on Cedar Street, we do have 2 9-story apartment buildings now, and also up at the north end of town at Sutton Place, there are some 9-story apartment buildings there, 2 of them, I believe.
Okay, that's fair enough. No, it's not, again, we need housing downtown. I think it's a great project. I'm even interested to learn more about this hazard line as well. My comment simply would be, we're trying to build downtown Simcoe. We're trying to attract young people to downtown Simcoe. And to me, looking like that at that building, it just looks like it's something from 20 years ago as to, I don't know, having a splash of color or something to go along with it. Councillor Columbus.
Yes, will this be a steel frame and concrete construction for the 8 stories?
I am not able to answer that right now.
Because I know, I think the Ontario Building Code now allows timber construction. So I'm just wondering what it would be. Thank you.
Through the chair, I believe Casey Dendecker is a guest on our thing here today, and he could better answer that.
Am I live here?
Yes.
Through you, Madam Chair. It's a it's a Stubbs precast system. That whole building is solid concrete, all precast, made into a plant not far from Simco. So the floors, the walls, the roof, the ceilings, everything is a prefabbed precast system made not far from that site. And the whole building will be fire suppression. Was fire suppression, and that's what it is, solid concrete. And those walls, we can change some colors, but they are a stained system, a special stain that comes from Europe, and this is a fairly advanced product. It's state of the art, and it's being used quite readily now.
Perfect. And I see PK Construction at Delhi, Boy, is involved with the construction of this project.
That's correct. I'm an independent consultant for PK, have been for the last 6 years, and I've been predominantly responsible for putting this package together along with other members of PK Construction. It's been a journey. We look forward to hopefully that council and the community support this project.
Thank you.
And as far as the building, I am very close to the client, so I'm working on other projects for him, and we're leaning towards a rental on this particular building as opposed to a condominium.
Okay, thank you, sir. I just, while you're listening as well, again, just since your client's looking for an additional couple stories, I saw Councillor Taylor there was also nodding in agreement with some of my comments about sort of the aesthetics of the building as we look to kind of improve the downtown situation in Simcoe. So did you want to add anything?
And I'd also like to let you know that the BIA is working on a mural program as well. So to somehow incorporate maybe a well-structured wall to have a large mural at some point down the road would be an interesting topic to discuss when you guys do come to the BIA board at some point to walk us through the process. All right, thank you.
Yeah, can I make a comment on that?
Of course, go ahead.
I would very much like to do that because to the south of that, there's other properties that I have been looking at. And when you talk about this hazard area, that could impact that as well. And so we see an opportunity in the downtown core for a number of projects. So we just hope that this could set kind of maybe the standards for other properties to be developed in that area.
That'd be great. I look forward to seeing some of the changes next time it comes back. Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you. Through you. A thought come to mind when I was hearing Councillor Columbus's comments about hiring local to provide some construction services. What about property management? What can, I know it's early on, but would there be an opportunity for a local company to bid on property management? Is the applicant considering providing those services themselves? What does property management for this property look like after a successful application?
Can I comment on that again?
Go ahead, please, sir.
The client has $200 million of properties throughout Ontario. A lot of it's commercial. He's moving more into some of the residential. I'm presently working on a similar project in Angus outside of Barrie, and I'm working right now on one here up in Parry Sound. He has his own infrastructure for property management, but in some residential cases, he's thinking of maybe doing that locally. So that is on the table.
Councillor Michelli, did I see you? We have one speaker registered as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted, and I think maybe this would be for Mrs. Elder, just because she has a better idea. In the staff report, it indicates that this project, which I do agree is a really good idea for that part of Simco, will increase the supply or the amount of affordable housing in that area. But and this comes up occasionally with some of these development ideas, that are we saying affordable housing as in the sort of the traditional sense that they would be, the typical subsidized housing, or are we really talking about affordable as in market rate housing?
Through the chair, I believe it would be market rate. I'm not sure if staff or if myself use that word affordable, but it would just be that it's an apartment as opposed to a house.
Thank you, Mary. And that word is used in a couple of spots. I'm referring to page 13 of our agenda package, the amount of affordable housing.
Further questions from councillors? Okay, we do have one speaker that's registered to speak. Eric Haverkamp, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. You have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Okay, dear council, Mayor Chop, and others who are listening in. I don't really have a form. Am I also am I on a video as well, or just am I a voice to you?
Nope, we can see your face.
Okay. So I guess I'd like to just share that we are the nearest neighbor to this development, and we are passionate people who, as an organization, who are actively involved actually, and passionate about developing the downtown core. And we're kind of living in this tension right now, because it's a tension between this knowing that part of downtown revitalization includes bringing a lot of additional people to our core. It's an essential part of our recovery as a downtown. And so we are, we're excited about downtown revitalization, and it really creates passion within us. And that's part of the reason we actually are participating. It's part of our vision and hope for Riverside 83 too, that we are that we would be a catalyst for further positive change. As a matter of fact, I would say that Riverside 83 being across the street from this development is probably going to be a selling feature for the developer, because it's going to be an amazing community space. Having said that, the tension we have lies between that and the fact that at 8 stories, it is going to cast quite a shadow on our small 1-story building. And Councillor Rabbits has referenced that a little bit already when he talked about the fact that we've invested at Riverside 83 in developing our southern exposure. I'm just gonna hold up a photo for a second. I hope this will work. So I don't know if that comes across very clearly or not, but that is Riverside 83, and it's a former liquor store, but currently being redeveloped, and a lot of the southern exposure has been put into glass, and as Councillor Rabbits properly stated, it basically has an atrium effect. In addition to that, we've developed, we're installing is this coming out, can you see it at all, or is this just really?
Yeah, you're good. It's good when you just kind of hold it steady there for a minute, just otherwise the glare.
That would be our future patio. You'll see the doors open there. The wooden posts and cross members, that's just the uprights will stay as part of the structure for the fencing or the the gating, the cross members will come off. But that's, anyway, just to give you a sense of some of the plans for the exterior. Additionally, as we move down along the building more towards the Lynn River, this would be, that's got a lot of glare to it, doesn't it? Sorry about that, but that would be then moving from the patio down towards Pond Street, towards the Lynn River. And behind that retaining wall, that is intended to be a future garden space to grow vegetables, so we can just harvest vegetables and bring them directly into our kitchens and into our teaching and our culinary skills room. Additionally, speaking of going back, now let's try a different one on that one because that's too much glare. Just let's go back to this photo right here. Let me give this one a try. All right, so from the patio, moving down to the Lynn River, there is going to be, we talked about murals. There's plans to put a mural on that southern exposure on that wall as well. So that would be apologize for the moving targets here. Again, I guess, just one more photo. I just got to throw this one out at you because this is now from the inside looking out. So we're looking out of our atrium area down towards the brick building currently on this shot. Now this is going to be so that you might see the brick on the in the red. You have to ignore all the Christmas wrapping paper on the windows, but just visualize that as all part of the atrium glass looking out at the brick there. So that will be basically become an 8-story building that we'll kind of look out at. And I think we're just concerned about being cast in the shadow. I appreciate, I met with Mary and I'm so appreciative of her coming in and just talking to me and just sharing and doing in actual fact, doing the shade studies. It's been really helpful. And I think that really ultimately Riverside 83 will be cast into the shadow from 11 a.m. Until about 3 or 3:30 p.m. from September 1 to April 15. That's the estimate I can derive from the different shadow studies that Mary has given me.
Eric, you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. So yeah, just there's just that time of the year when it's the darkest, and just having invested and hoped on, and just having that hope of having a southern exposure that would be in the light. I'm just thinking later on this week, starting tomorrow and Thursday and Friday and the weekend, it's supposed to be 18 degrees. It'd probably be one of the few patios in town that could be open, frankly, if it were in the sun. If it's in the shade, it's probably too cold. It's supposed to be 18 degrees. It'd be a beautiful day in the sun on the patio. But when it's in the shade, it won't work. Anyway, that's our concern. But I hope you can understand our conundrum, because we're all about downtown revitalization. So we're really, really caught in this tension. And maybe we could talk with the developers and figure out a solution. I really hope we could. That would be my heart and my hope. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Questions from committee members? Okay, thanks for joining us, Eric.
Thank you.
Any further questions from council members? Okay, if I could have a motion to close the public hearing on this property. Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Columbus. All those in favor? And that's carried. The next is staff report. I think I might have this out of order, but PD 20-62. Oh, my apologies. that staff report PD 20-61, the public hearing report for OPNPL 2020106 and ZNPL 2020107 be received for information, and that comments received as part of the statutory public meeting be considered in a future recommendation staff report. All those in favor? That's carried. Moving on then to staff report PD 20-62, I believe. Is that the correct number, Owen? Fabian, is that you presenting that report as well?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is correct. It is me presenting the report. Yep. Okay. Sorry, I'm just going to take control so I can control the slides. Thank you. So this application was submitted by the agent, Mary Elder, on behalf of the property owner. The application is to amend the Norfolk County zoning bylaw to change the zoning on the property from agricultural to hamlet residential, with a special provision to permit a 20-meter wide road frontage to bring the subject lands into conformity with the Norfolk County official plan. The proposed 20-meter road frontage is the future access point to the future plan of subdivision. So at a later date, a draft plan of subdivision is to be submitted. At this time, staff have been advised that it would be a 16-lot plan of subdivision, and we do not have a timeline as to when that would essentially be applied for. So a portion of the subject lands is zoned hazard lands. So this portion here, right there. So it's zoned hazard land, and this is actually the location of the Mary Mackenzie drain. So although it's zoned hazard land and it's shown on the map, this part of the property is not a part of the application because the proposed zoning change, the proposed development would essentially stop at the hazard line. So I just wanted to flag that they were not imposing on the hazard lands whatsoever. The idea is to have the development stop at the hazard land line and have the development essentially take place in the other area marked as subject lands. So additional documentation would be required for the draft plan of subdivision once it is submitted. So through circulation, there were no comments received from agencies. For this application, there were a total of 2 letters that were received from members of the public. So the letters were received after the information report was completed and thus were not included as part of the appendix. The letters will be attached to the following recommendation report as an appendix for council consideration. To summarize the contents of the letters, the property owners raised concerns in regards to the subject application, and their concerns are as follows. So they have concerns in regards to the effects of the proposed development on the existing properties and the value of those properties. They also have concerns in regards to drainage as well as groundwater flooding, on the effects of that on the current existing homes. Concerns were also raised in regards to if the proposed development is to be located along the abutting lot lines, there would be a lack of green space and vegetation. Other comments also included the questions surrounding the developer's overall intent with the property in regards to the zone. So specifically the lot size, types of dwellings, building height, and building size. There were further concerns surrounding public input, whether the draft plan of whether there would be opportunities for approval and public input from the public at that time. So so I've just kind of summarized the comments, and I'm just going to go through in case anybody from who submitted a letter is listening, just to address those comments. So essentially, in terms of drainage and groundwater flooding, these comments would be addressed through the draft plan of subdivision application, as well as the vegetation and green space that would also be addressed at a later date. In terms of the development plan in regards to the zone, so by changing the lands from agricultural to hamlet residential, the hamlet residential zone currently permits single detached dwellings, a bed and breakfast, a daycare nursery, a home industry, and a home occupation. So the applicant has indicated that the intent is to create a 16-lot subdivision that would consist of single detached homes. The minimum lot size is 0.4 hectares or 1 acre. So in addition, they also are required to submit a geotechnical study in case if to determine whether or not the lot sizes could be supported by a septic system. The single detached dwellings are permitted use within the Hamlet residential zone. The maximum building height is 11 meters. And in terms of the overall size of the dwelling, that is essentially determined by the other zone provisions, such as like the setback, the interior and exterior side yards, as well as the rear yard setbacks. So it's, essentially there would be a building envelope that could exist on each individual lot. So in terms of the public input, there is intent for the applicant to obtain zoning approval first, and then if that is approved, then their intent is to subsequently apply for a draft plan of subdivision, which is a public process where members of the public could share any comments or concerns or feedback on the proposed development. At this time, so staff will recognize the comments that were submitted and answer to those comments in the following recommendation report for council consideration, as well as any comments that are also received during the public hearing as well. So again, the letters will be included as part of the appendix in the following recommendation report. And I'm available to answer any questions that you may have, as well as the agent, Mary Elder. She's available on Teams, and she can assist in answering any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabian. Questions from councillors? Councillor Columbus, go ahead.
Thank you for that excellent report, Fabian. Just to say that we all know that there's drainage issues in that particular area. When the subdivision is actually proposed, will you be calling for the necessary curb and gutter to be installed so that it can be drained properly into that Mackenzie drain?
Through the chair, so at that time, a grading plan and a servicing plan would be required through draft plan of subdivision. And so the essentially, it would be reviewed at that time at a later date.
Further questions from councillors? Okay, I believe Mary Elder, will you be presenting again on behalf of the applicant?
I don't have a PowerPoint, but I was going to make a few comments if I might.
Okay, perfect.
So this is for a new Hamlet subdivision in Greens Corners. They've currently got conditional approval for 2 lots fronting on Turkey Point Road. And the conditions were that the zoning be changed to Hamlet residential. And of course, because the area that was left was only 20 meters in frontage, which is to be the future road, there needs to be an exception for that. So many studies are needed for the draft plan of subdivision application. The sale of the 2 lots first in order to do that. Then we'll submit the draft plan of subdivision and bring that forward to a public meeting. Any questions?
Any questions from councillors? Okay, Mr. Bosma, did you wish to add any additional comments? Is he even on the line?
Hello?
Good day, sir. Did you wish to add anything else to Mary's comments?
No, I'm fine with Mary's comments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any questions from the committee? Moving on then, if I could have a motion to approve the staff recommendation or propose an alternative staff recommendation. Councillor Michele, seconded by Councillor Huffman. All those in favor? And that's carried. And the final staff report today is staff report PD 20-57, an application that's been received to approve a site-specific official plan and zoning bylaw amendment to replace a 2-story single detached house without garage with a 2-story single detached house with an attached garage in a hazard land zone. Tom and Lisa Leach and Agent Civic Planning Solutions have put forth the application affecting the lands described as 11 Elm Park Drive. And Mohammed, I believe you are presenting this report. Is that correct?
Correct, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and the Council. This report, this proposal is for a replacement dwelling. The applicant is proposing to demolish the old house and replace it with a new residential dwelling. The site is located at the western side of Port Dover waterfront area along the bank of Lake Erie. Elm Park Drive, where the subject property is located, is known as a old cottage area with around 18 houses. Because they are built as a cottage historically, most of them were not built with the attached garage and proper insulated walls. Eventually, many of them have already been replaced and renovated. This subject house is more than 100 years old and in a dire condition. A replacement dwelling will be a logical planning approach from the perspective of safety and vitality of the property. The proposed dwelling is mostly in hazard land, like many other dwellings in Lakeshore area. Because it is in the hazard land, an official plan and a zoning bylaw amendment will be required. Generally, Norfolk County official plan states that in such areas, reasonable compromise shall be made to support continued use and future developments. The two-story replacement dwelling is slightly larger than the existing dwelling with an attached garage. As you can see in the slide, the building footprint is proposed further away from the top of the bank, which is a better layout. A shoreline protection plan is also included with the continuous retaining wall along the shoreline for further protection. And these are all approved already by LPRCM. So there are no major concerns received from the agencies and internal staff. LPRC approved the proposal through a LPRC hearing. Ministry of Heritage, Tourism and Culture triggers an archaeological assessment because of the proximity to the water body. One public submission is received in favor of the proposal. The letter indicates that the neighbors will appreciate the replacement of this dwelling. This report is presented for information, and comments received from this meeting will be considered for future recommendations. That's everything for me, and I think Agent David Rowe from Civic Planning Solutions is registered to speak. And I'll also be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mohammed. Questions from councillors? Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. Through you to Mohammed. I think you've already kind of touched on the changing area with the upgrades to the former cottages. There is a great letter that was an additional submission that's sitting here on our desks outlining just how much change has gone on in that area, and I do believe that this will be another positive one. And fun fact, I believe that this was actually a hotel many years ago, although it is not designated as heritage, but it's in rough shape, and some new life needs to certainly be put onto that property. But my question to you is on page 4 of 15 in the agenda, 4 of 15 in the report, 77 in the agenda, and page 80 in the agenda, there is mention to an archaeological assessment and an endangered species report. Can you comment on that? I don't believe that we've had any other reports come forward that address this, and I don't recall hearing about it in any of the other replacements that have gone on in Elm Park. So can you provide some clarity to why that is in the report?
To Madam Chair, to Councillor Martin. Yes, this is a very good question, I think. These two items are not the municipal requirements. The first one, archaeological assessment, this is based on the provincial criteria, which is provided by the Ministry of Environment. Ministry of Culture. So what they do is they generally do an overarching procedure of how to trigger some specific developments which are near to water body and then if there is any historical transport route or any archaeological existing archaeological site nearby. These are some criteria they follow, and this is just a normal procedure they did. And based on that, they provided a comment that it will trigger a archaeological assessment. But definitely, we also understand that this is a replacement dwelling, and there'll be no major intervention on the subject site. So from planning perspective, from the county, we did not actually require that, but this is completely a comment came from the province. And in regard to your second comments about the endangered species, this is also, in fact, it's good that we actually had a meeting with the Ministry of Environment today this afternoon regarding that. They have changed some procedures, and I think it is possible that requirement might be lifted, and we'll keep in communication with the applicant about that.
Thank you.
Councilor Michelle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to add to what Councillor Martin was referring to with regard to the archaeological assessment, I do believe that obviously when that study is completed, would you anticipate that any significant changes may have to be made to this plan?
Through the chair, it's Tricia here. I'm just going to respond. So when we received this comment from the ministry staff, we were somewhat surprised as well, because this kind of came out of nowhere with the comment for that requirement. So we are continuing to have the conversation with ministry officials around the requirement for the archaeological assessment for the replacement of an existing structure. So that continues to be ongoing, and hopefully we can find some resolution there.
Thank you, Tricia.
Councilor Columbus.
Yes, I know we dealt with this application at the hearing at the LPRCA, but I'm trying to remember, what was the size, the square footage of this building lot or lot that we're talking about?
Through Madam Chair to the Council, the existing size of the building is 209 square meter, and the new proposed development will be around 90 square meter more than what it is right now. I'm talking about the usable floor space. They also added an attached garage, which will not be considered as a usable space. So that would be in addition.
But I'm looking for, sir, I'm looking for the size of the lot. Like, is it half acre, quarter acre, or
David Rowe speaking next, so perhaps you could
30,000 square feet, or?
I cannot recall exact the size, but maybe Agent David Rowe might be.
Okay, I'll wait for him.
Any further questions? Mr. Rowe, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. And actually, my client, Tom Leach, is on the line as well. I'll let him give some of the background, and he can give specifics on the lot size and the building size. And then I will address the SAR issue as well as the archaeological and environmental impact portion. So if maybe Tom could begin now, that would be good.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. And yeah, a little bit of background, just sort of how we got to where we're at now. Lisa and I purchased this property back in 2016 with the intent of making Port Dover our new home. So soon after purchasing the property, it became very, I guess, clear to us or evident to us that conducting a major renovation on the existing home really was not a good use of time nor money. And so since the acquisition, we've made significant investment and effort to improve the property, and very important to ensure compliance with any municipal and agency requirements. So on closing, we gathered a survey with elevations. We employed Englobe Engineering to help us with the slope stability report, Riggs Engineering for shoreline erosion control, and then subsequent installation of the steel seawall in 2018. Beyond that, we disconnected the services from the house and obtained the appropriate sign-offs from the various utility providers in preparation for demolition. We have not submitted for a demolition permit at this point. Back in October, as Mohammed mentioned in his report, we did receive our construction permit from Long Point Region. The Yonge Park neighborhood, as we've come to know and love, very tight-knit neighborhood. The residents keep the properties very well. Construction of a new home, it's always going to come with a certain amount of disruption to households and to neighbors that are near the construction site. And it's a very strong consideration with Lisa and I to minimize that disruption where possible. And our desire to commence construction later this year or early in 21, it's not by accident. Port Dover is a lakeside community. The residents, the visitors, spend a great deal of time outdoors during the warmer seasons. The earthwork portion of construction can be frustrating, messy, noisy, and we felt it best that this phase of construction be completed in the winter months when people are mainly indoors. The existing house, it's an eyesore. The community's been very, very gracious in putting up with as long as they have, and it is certainly a source of embarrassment to Lisa and I. I guess we're anxious to get this moving along, as you might expect, and I recognize that we do have to go through the appropriate protocols. Everybody will recognize the new home construction market. It's very active, and securing a builder can be a challenge. Our builder and his trades are prepared to move forward with their build later this year or early in 21, but with further delays, he won't commit to the project. And as you can understand, at this late date, securing another custom home builder for the spring or summer of 21, it's going to be a challenge. And so we certainly want to work with the planners and with council to move this forward as quickly as possible. A side note, Mohammed, thank you very much so far for what you've done in keeping this moving forward, and you're quick to answer emails and phone calls, and we absolutely appreciate that. Thanks, David.
I think from points that I want to raise, first of all, the archaeological. We're dealing with an existing situation where we are replacing a house. The house will be, a portion of it will be on the site where the existing house is, but also a portion will be on where the existing circular driveway is. So my thought on this is that the buildable area on this lot, which is really quite small compared to the overall lot size because of the ravine, actually has been disturbed historically, and I simply don't think that it would be necessary to do an archaeological report. I've done a fair number of rebuilds at Turkey Point and Long Point, and it's interesting, they're right on the lake or in the lake, and we've never been asked for this type of thing before. As far as the species at risk, most of the property was all lawn except for the ravine portion on the west side. So obviously, there's, in terms of plant species, there really aren't any. In any species that would be within the ravine, which is hazard land and we're in fact not permitted to build on. So again, I think that is a bit of an overreach. And then finally, the designation of the trees on this property and the neighbors as provincially significant woodlands, again, I think is a bit of a stretch. Historically, I can maybe give council some background. When the province provided Norfolk County and Haldimand, where I was, with mapping of provincially significant woodland, basically they just looked at air photography and wherever there were trees. And then again, in this case, the trees, yeah, there are trees there, but they're along the west side within the ravine and won't be touched or affected by the house, the new house. So again, I think this is really not really necessary, and again, a bit of an overreach. The province provided the counties with forestry mapping, but they never did any on-site reviews. And I think what you wind up doing in many cases, hiring biologists to determine is in fact even significant. In most cases, or a lot of cases, it clearly isn't. Again, we're talking a replacement of an existing structure within an urban area, and in a situation where we won't be touching any trees, nor interfering with, and I can't imagine that there being really any species at risk, and if there are, they would certainly be in the ravine and not where we're going to be touched. So I know the province loves their little checklists, but in this case, I would at the very least would like a management manager of planning or perhaps general manager to take a good look at the necessity of these types of studies, which again drag out the approval process and cost my client frankly money to have them done in all likelihood for no particularly good reason. That's basically my 2 cents anyway.
Thanks, David, and thanks to Tom and Lisa for being here. A question for you, Tom. When you bought the property in 2016, how long after that did you begin your planning process? Like, how many years have you been at this point?
Yeah, off and on for 4 years, more on than off. So we had the survey done immediately on closing. My recollection is my first phone call to Long Point Region, and I believe to the county, would have been late in 2016, early 2017, and then on with the having the Englobe slope stability report completed in ahead of the second engineering report for the seawall. So it's been a fairly steady process through the last 4 years.
I have to commend you because you were equally as gracious at LPRCA when you guys did your presentation as you were today. And I think if I were you, after 4 years, I would have lost my mind at this point, mostly because I think I heard the same presentation that you already had to do at LPRCA. I almost feel like I know my way around your house at this point. I also, David, I guess the question's to you. I mean, this is the Ford government that's supposed to be about less red tape and so on and so forth. So when we receive a comment from the ministry in terms of an archaeological assessment, my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's not an absolute requirement that the county must ask for that. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. On these matters, the counties and their staff do have discretion. And I would think the response in this would be that it's an active, developed area with a long history of development on it, and the necessity, frankly, looking for artifacts under a driveway, I think is a bit of a stretch. And then that also goes for the EIS on the significant woodlands and species at risk. Actually, the province has now taken the municipalities out of the species at risk equation and said really it's a matter between the province and the property owner, which all property owners have to take into account no matter any type of development they may be doing on their properties.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Further questions from the committee for David? Thank you for joining us. My question is back to staff again then. You know, Councillor Columbus, Councillor Geisens, Councillor Michelle, myself, we already heard this presentation essentially at LPRCA meeting. I mean, it's a perfect example of this ridiculous double permitting process since it's been presented twice. How do we address this issue with the archaeological assessment and the species at risk? I mean, to me, the Ford government campaigned on less red tape. Every council member I see sitting here today campaigned on less red tape in our planning department. And this is a perfect example of something to me that's makes no sense when the house is being located in the exact same location that it already was.
Through Madam Chair, I think Brandon will probably add at the end, but I also want to reiterate that regarding the species at risk, I think there is an option that we can waive that. We just have a meeting this afternoon about that process, and there is a possibility that we'll continue our communication with the Ministry of Environment, and I think there is a possibility that that can be waived. In regard to the archaeological assessment, I think here there are two options. One is we can communicate again with the Ministry of Culture regarding that, and probably from the applicant's position also, he can also communicate with them. That's one approach we can start with. Another one is the archaeological assessment has several phases. The first phase is just as far as I'm concerned, is just a preliminary inspection of whether there is any potential archaeological figure is found in that area. So that's the first phase. If that phase pass the criteria, then they go to the next phase, and then in that way you have phase until phase 4. So the initial phase can be done very quickly. That might be another option, but again, I'm leaving to Brandon to comment on that.
Sure, thanks, Mohammed, and through the chair, just to supplement. So some of the key points, our understanding is this zone change application was received this summer. So it's been 4 months for us, and we're bringing it to council. We can, as staff, identify what is a reasonable requirement in this case. And so an archaeological assessment may be recommended to not necessarily be reasonable. Council, as the approval authority, can then make the determination when we bring this application to council very shortly. From our perspective, the critical path is the Conservation Authority. They've already accepted it. The building is being moved further away from the top of the bank. It's replacing the existing one, and likely we can find a quick path to move forward.
Thanks, Brandon. I like your thinking. I mean, to me, even with the stage 1 of the archaeological assessment seems a bit of an overreach from a government that campaigned on, again, reducing red tape. It's not like this house is being built in a new location. It's being built exactly, where it was previously. So anything further from council members? Councillor Columbus.
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. So in the recommendation on page 8 that's put together by staff, can we add a line in there after the first paragraph, like with the fact that the property was previously developed in a built-up urban area, that the need for an archaeological assessment, an EIS, and a, I forget what else it was, be neglected or be lifted. Can we add that in there so that Ministry of Culture and Ministry of Environment know that we actually, as a hearing board, do support lifting it?
So, Madam Chair, to Councillor Columbus, yes, I'm picking that back, and we'll add that in our recommendation report.
Can you, I put some funny wording together, but can you give us a better wording than what I gave you that we will see coming down the pipe here?
Yes, we'll work on that, and I think we'll get back to you also with the text regarding that.
Like the mayor said, Mr. Rowe called it an overreach, and she called it red tape, and it is red tape. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Columbus. David, could you perhaps list the couple of things for us exactly? My thoughts would be to include at the end that in view of the public hearing for Councillor Columbus's motion there, just to refine it a bit. Maybe you could provide the better language to go along with that.
Yes, that council waives the requirement for an archaeological review, an environmental impact study, and a SAR evaluation, the species at risk, SAR evaluation.
Okay, thanks, David. I'm just going to ask
Thank
Brandon
you.
a question about that, Councillor Columbus, if that's okay.
Yes, David, can we actually mention that because the property's in a built-up urban area and has been previously developed?
Yes, what I would do is just add that right at the end of what I just said, on the basis that the property is located within an existing developed area of Port Dover.
Perfect.
Perfect, yeah, good. That sounds good to me too.
Brandon, so would the language be that we are waiving it, given that this is only a public hearings committee, or would the language be that in our view, in the view of the public hearings committee, we would not endorse X, Y, and Z?
To the chair.
Again, I understand this isn't binding, but just so it's,
Yeah, to
provides
the
you with
chair, I would say from the staff perspective, we would address this in the next report, and so it's not necessary. However, from council's perspective, and for clarity for the applicant, I can see why you may want to provide that as a recommendation and then subsequent resolution now. So one option would be, and that's what I thought would be waiving the requirement, but another option could be that those studies, listing those studies, are not required prior to a decision on the zoning bylaw amendment. Probably more clear, it's probably more clear if you want to take the perspective that they're not required at all. But for now, if you say not required prior to the decision on the zoning bylaw amendment, then that gives us some time by the next final report to clarify that with the agencies that requested it.
So what about something as simple as the public hearing committee does not in provincial ask of an archaeological review, an EIS, and the SARS evaluation on the basis that the property is located within an urban area of Port Dover? Is that okay? You're thinking.
That is something within the purview of committee and council. Yes, you could do that.
Again, I understand it's not binding, but, and then you have it for the record, this is, all of council's voted on it today, you know, clearly you're getting a strong endorsement then, it's on paper, and if there's a way for staff to work around that, then.
Yeah, through the chair, usually that happens on the decision-making time, but it does provide even more clarity if it happens now.
Perfect. Okay, so the addition then, Councillor Columbus, I'm assuming you're moving staff's recommendation with the addition that the Public Hearings Committee does not endorse the provincial ask for an archaeological review, an EIS, and a species at risk evaluation on the basis that the property is located within the urban area of Port Dover.
And has been previously developed.
And has been previously developed. Seconder for that motion? And any further discussion? All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Sorry, Brandon, we're not trying to chirp on, we're just, you know, this is one of the big things that this council's run on, and this is, I think, a classic example of, again, having just seen this application at Long Point, that's through no fault of your own, but, you know, it's very evident of some of the challenges that people face. So I guess with that, I just need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Geisens, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? That's carried. Have a good night, everyone.